one of the categories of animations in Jetpack Compose system is animations that are based on state, by which I mean you have some state variable that determines some animation and the amount of that animation that's supposed to run. For example, you specify the length of a progress bar, or you specify a color to be animated to another color based on some state. So the first type of these state-based animations is infinite transitions or infinite animations that you can use to create, for example, a progress bar, an infinite progress bar, or some other waiting UI. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create these infinite transitions using Jetpack Compose, of course. So first, let's get started by creating a new project in Android Studio. Empty compose activity, next, and I name my project Infinite Compose Transitions, of course, and everything is okay. The configuration, I press finish and wait for the project to be created. Alright, the project is created. I remove the composables that have been added by Android Studio. And also the content inside my application theme. And then I create a new composable. I name it my infinite transition demo. Let's call it demo 1. We might create another one also, and inside it I'm going to create some state that will help me create my infinite transition. First, you need to know, in order to create an infinite transition in Jetpack Compose, we need to create a transition object, and we do that by calling this. Let's call my variable infinite transition, and by remember, I call remember infinite transition. This creates an infinite transition object and remembers it for my composable. And also I'm going to add a preview annotation so that I can have a preview as much as where possible, you know. And this is my infinite transition. By the way, this should be equal. It is not a delegate, so I remove by. Now I have my infinite now I have my infinite transition. Before I create the transition and apply the transition, let's create our UI that is supposed to be animated. And for that, I'm going to create a very simple UI, a box. And for that, let's add a modifier, fill max size. Let's give it some padding. Alright, import padding, and inside the box I'm going to draw a line that is later supposed to act as a progress bar, as an infinite progress bar or something similar to that. So I add a canvas And for the canvas I add a modifier and fill max size for the modifier, and in the body of the canvas I'm going to draw my line. First let's see, I need to have for the line some parameters. Draw line, and as you can see I have a color dot blue. I select the color of blue as the color of drawing here, import color, and I have start, I have end, and I have stroke width. These are some parameters that you might want to specify. Some of them are mandatory, like start and end. Note that because I'm going to make this composable and make this animation infinite, I need to create some state. Let's add the state variable. For the start of the line, actually I can add val start, line start, some variable here, remember, import remember mutable state of let's start with 0f. It's true that this gives me a state variable, but since I'm looking for an infinite transition and a transition that runs infinitely, I'm going to need some extension function from infinite transition, and for that I'm gonna call infinite transition dot animate float. I'm gonna animate some float variable, and this float variable, since this is a delegate, I'm gonna import get value, and parameters for this are initial value, target value, and animation spec. These are very important and at the same time simple to use. Initial value and target value specify the range of my animation. Look, I'm going to animate my line if the length of my line is something like this, from this distance, from this point to this point, then I have to animate the beginning of the line so that the line moves to toward the end of the screen. So here I'm going to specify initial value as 0f and target value some larger value, like for example 300f, and animation spec has to be a repeatable animation, an infinite transition or animation. So to create an infinite repeatable spec, I say infinite repeatable. This is the function that you will need to create infinite animations, and in turn it has its own parameters like animation, which specifies a duration based animation, and that duration based animation can be a simple animation like a tween animation. So I use a tween animation here that runs, for example, for 1 second or 1000 milliseconds. And I leave the other parameters to their default values. I don't change them. So I have my animation here for infinite repeatable and the repeat mode. The repeat mode by default is restart, which means when the line goes to the end of the page, to the end of the screen, then it starts appearing from the right, and it repeats this infinite movement forever. So let's use that in creating our canvas. Draw a line as a start that needs an offset. I create an offset here, an offset object, and for the x variable I need to give it the x coordinate. So for the x coordinate I'm gonna give line start plus some length, the length of the line that I'm supposed to create. For the length of the line you can give, for example, some arbitrary value like 200f, 200 pixels. And for the y variable, for the y coordinate, I'm going to use the half of the available height for this canvas. So I say size dot height divided by 2. And sorry, for the beginning I don't need the length of the line, I just say line start, and I will use that for the end parameter of draw line. So I say here offset, another offset, go from line start to line start plus 200f, and the y coordinate is the same, size height divided by 2, half of the available height, or at the center of the available height. And for the stroke width, let's specify the stroke width, which is a float variable. I give it 5f, and we should have our box. Let's switch to a split mode and also run our application to see how it runs on the emulator. We wait for the application to be built and deployed to the device. Okay, as you can see, we have no output from here on our device, and the reason is that we haven't used our function or our composable inside main activity. Let's call it my infinite transition. Run it again. We won't have to wait long because it has already been built. It should come up very soon. Alright, as you can see, we have an infinite transition that runs. It's not very beautiful, but it shows you the idea. As you can see, the line start parameter keeps animating using our infinite transition, and when the animation reaches the end of the cycle, it repeats itself using the repeat mode parameter that has been provided to the system by default. And you can also reverse it by giving it another parameter. For example, here you can specify repeat mode as repeat mode dot reverse. In that case, the animation will reverse itself. Actually, let's give it a try. Repeat mode dot reverse, import it, run the application again. There we go. As you can see, now our animation is being reversed when line start value reaches the end of the cycle for the animation, and then it repeats itself. Actually, it reverses itself by coming to the start and starting another cycle of animating its value. So actually, I can make it more beautiful by giving it more length, by giving a bigger end or target value for the repeatable animation, by giving it, for example, 600F for the target value. And also I can increase the width of the canvas, the width of the draw line function. Here I increase the stroke width to 10F, and I can also change the duration to smaller value like 500 milliseconds or half a second, and run the application again. There we go. This is an infinite transition, not too bad. It basically shows you how a transition using infinite transition system in Jetpack Compose works. Now let's go back to our code and create something more complex using the same system that I just discussed. I'm gonna create a composable and name it infinite transition demo 2, and it has a my, the previous one, so I add my infinite transition, and let's make that a preview as well. Having a preview when possible is a good idea because it gives you less pains in order to run the application on the emulator, because you have a preview here when possible. And inside the composable, I'm going to again use canvas to draw something new. This time I'm going to draw 2 circles, and these circles have to be animated, and these circles are supposed to be animated in different directions. And in order to animate them, I'm gonna animate actually their rotation. Let's see that in action. Again, I'm gonna use a box. So let's create a box modifier to give it our desired width and height. Actually, I'm gonna give it a size, fill max size, and let's give it half of the available space. And inside it I'm gonna create a canvas, and it has a modifier. I'm gonna use the modifier to center the canvas, so I use align to center it inside the box using alignment.center value as the value of this modifier. And it has to fill the available space, fill max size, which means it will fill in the available space inside its parent. And let's also give it a padding like 8 dip, and that's it. Next we have to give it its drawing. For the drawing I'm gonna draw 2 circles. Draw circle, and these circles will be on each other first, but when I rotate them, when these are rotated in different directions, you will see that they are 2 circles, and one of the circles will rotate around the X axis, which means I will rotate or pitch them. We call this pitch in 3D animation. And the other one will be rotated around the Y axis, or it will perform a yaw. We call this pitch and yaw. So draw circle, the parameters for the draw circle are here. Color dot black, I use a simple color here, and I also accept the default radius, which is the half of the available width or height. Every dimension that is less, the shorter dimension, the smaller dimension, half of it will be used as the radius. And then the center by default is center, the center of this canvas. I accept it, I don't change it. And looks like we don't have for now other thing to override here. Draw circle, the second circle I draw that with the same color. You can give it another color, doesn't matter, but note that this is the first circle and this is the second circle. These circles are just dead for now, they will not do anything. Let's see the preview. Okay, our preview should appear now. The circles are too small. Let's use the whole available space or maximum size for the box, so that we have a big enough available space for our canvas to show us the animation. And now a preview refresh. Okay, that's our circle, but note that this circle is filled with color, and I don't want it. I want this to have a different draw style, so I changed the style parameter from the default value of fill to stroke, and for the stroke I specify a stroke like to F, the width of the stroke, and for the second one stroke as the drawing style. And now it's time for the rotations. Note that we have two rotations. As I said, I want to give a pitch to the first circle and a yaw or rotation around the y axis to the second circle. So I create this here. First, you have to also create the infinite transition. It's very important. Val my infinite transition. My infinite transition equals, remember, infinite transition, and the first rotation is, I call it pitch by my infinite transition dot animate float. The degrees for rotation are specified as floats, so I use animate float here, and I'm gonna animate from 0 to 90 degrees. So 0 is my initial value, and 90 f will be my target value or degree, and my animation spec, I can leave it to the default animation or I can change it. I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna use it specifically so that you see more of customization in action. And this has to be animation spec, has to be a repeatable animation. So I need to call infinite repeatable, and in turn it has its parameters, animation and repeat mode. For the animation, I'm going to use tween for 500 milliseconds, and for the repeat mode, I'm gonna use repeat mode dot reverse. It's very important because reverse mode is the mode that actually makes this animation look the way we want it to look, and restart will not work for us. I mean, in terms of beauty. Otherwise, technically both of them work. And the next rotation or a state is yaw, or rotation around the y-axis, and it is again an infinite transition, my infinite transition dot animate float. And look, it added the parameters. We don't have to name the parameters manually. Again, it's 0, initial value is 0 to 90 f to 90 degrees, and animation spec is infinite repeatable, animation parameter is tween. I want the two animations to look like each other. I don't want them to look non-agreeing and fighting with each other. Repeat mode is reverse. Pitch and yaw. And look, actually I have added both of my circles inside one canvas, and in order to have two different rotations and two different transformations on the shapes, I need to add the second circle inside the body of another canvas. So I add another canvas here, modifier, and I move the draw circle for the second circle inside the second canvas, along with their parameters: fill max, size, padding 8 depth, and alignment dot center. Okay, now let's add the transformations, the pitch and yaw. First, to this circle, in order to add it to this canvas, I need to use the graphics layer modifier. The graphics layer modifier allows us to do special transformations that are not usually possible inside the draw scope. For example, this way inside graphics layer you can have advanced rotations, like rotation around the y-axis, x-axis and z-axis. As you can see, rotation y, rotation z, camera distance, and so on and so forth. And here I'm gonna use rotation x, and for its value I'm gonna use my pitch state. And I do the same for the second canvas graphics layer, but this time I will do another rotation, which is yaw. So I will do rotation around the y-axis. Rotation y equals yaw. Alright, let's now run after a final check to see we have done everything correctly. We added a box containing two canvases with two different rotations. Okay, let's run the application on the emulator and see the result. Again, we forgot to make a call to this new composable inside our main activity. So let's do that. My infinite transition. My infinite transition demo 2. Actually, I'm gonna comment out the previous one and call the second one my infinite transition demo 2 and run it. There we go. As you can see, we have our animation running, but yes, it's not very exactly the same that we expected, but it's actually using the whole available space, and probably that's the reason why the height looks so big for the circle when it's rotating. And as you can see, it is doing a reverse transition when it's coming back. Each time it goes from 0 to 90 degrees of rotation, and then it reverses the animation. Let's make it smaller. Let's make our circles smaller, in fact. I give a smaller fraction to fill max size so that I get half of the available space for the box, and run it again. Alright, not too bad, it's better. And I can also increase the stroke width for the circles that I draw. So I change that to 5 or 4 pixels. I exit the app for now, and after increasing the stroke width, in order to make actually this animation more interesting, I'm going to add a transform inside the draw scope to each of my circles as well. So here I select the draw circle line and add a starting and ending pair of curly braces, and then apply a rotation here, a simple rotation around the Z axis. So I import rotate. It's the first option to import, and the amount of rotation in degrees, I give it a 45 degrees of rotation, and I leave other options to their default because they're good. I do the same for my first circle over here inside the draw scope, and rotate in degrees. The amount of rotation I'm going to use is 45, and run the application, see the result on the device. Okay, it's beautiful. As you can see, now we have an animating weighting UI that you can use in your applications, and you can customize it to use in your applications to show some updating or to show some connecting status. Of course, I have seen that, or I have seen similar UI in some application before, and I was trying to emulate it, and meanwhile show the usage of infinite transition in Jetpack Compose. Okay, now before I wrap up this video, I'm going to use both of these two animations inside my final application. So here I'm gonna wrap the two functions inside a column. Modifier that fill max size, and I'm gonna give the two actually the two functions two weights, to equal weights, so that I don't take the whole available space for each of them. You can also give each of them half of the available height to make it even for both of them. So here inside the box, for the first animatable, for the first infinite transition, I can give it fill max size of 0.5 f, so that I give half of the size, half of the whole size to the first function and the other half to the second one. Okay, let's also give it some content alignment, some horizontal alignment, dot center horizontally. And now let's run the application. What happened? Looks like it's taking the first function is taking the whole available height. Yes, fill max size. I have used fill max size twice, and that's the reason that it doesn't work. The first fill max size takes precedence. There we go. Not too bad. Actually, we have two animating UIs, two infinite transitions, that both of them are running in our application. You can make them a little bit more intelligent by activating or deactivating them, by clicking on them, or by adding some other condition to your application, showing or hiding them based on some other state, and things that you might like to implement for your specific transition scenarios and transition needs in your application. Note that now that I'm running these two infinite transitions on my computer, the computer is getting very hot, and the reason is that animation is heavy, and you should minimize the amount of animation that you use in your application, and use animations wisely and only when it is needed. And the animation that you see here is not supposed and should not be run forever in your application. You should actually consider showing these types of UIs only when the user needs to wait for something to happen, needs to wait for a connection to be established, or for a process to be completed, and so on and so forth. I hope that you liked this video on infinite transitions and Jetpack Compose, and I see you in the next video.